You were taught that telepathy belongs in cheap science fiction paperbacks. You were profoundly wrong. Today, inside heavily funded laboratories, a macaque monkey navigates a complex digital maze using only the electrical spikes in its motor cortex. Across the hall, a completely paralyzed human subject perfectly dictates an email without twitching a single facial muscle. Telepathy is no longer magic. It is a measurable, highly weaponized engineering reality happening right now. Right now, you consider your skull an impenetrable biological vault. You believe your private impulses are yours alone. That comforting narrative is a myth. By the year 2030, that sacred firewall will collapse. Your internal monologue and fleeting emotions will be converted into rigid streams of 1 and 0 binary code, entirely readable by any corporation holding the correct decryption algorithm. Ignorance means becoming the ultimate compromised data point in a radically transparent world. We are going to pull back the curtain on a multi-billion-dollar quiet war currently raging between the Pentagon and Silicon Valley elites. They are not racing to build a better smartphone. They are racing to map the human soul. I will give you the precise intellectual tools to understand exactly how your neurochemistry is being prepared for integration into the digital cloud. Understanding this architecture is your only survival advantage in the coming post-biological era. Look around this empty university lecture hall. The dust settling in the air is a monument to an obsolete way of learning. Suspended directly above the podium is a massive, glowing model of a human brain. We are pushing past the protective membranes, diving deep into the gray matter. The soft biological tissue instantly dissolves into a blinding, tangled fiber optic network. It looks exactly like a vast metropolitan city grid seen from low Earth orbit at midnight, pulsing with synthetic energy. Here is the grand paradox of your own existence. This biological engine, the very source of human consciousness, operates on exactly 20 watts of raw electrical power. That is barely enough energy to illuminate a dim refrigerator light bulb. Yet, this wet lump of fat and water effortlessly outcomputes the world's most colossal, energy-devouring supercomputers. It is the ultimate marvel of thermodynamic efficiency, and we are finally learning how to reverse engineer its complex architecture. You were programmed to believe that a thought is an abstract, formless concept, a philosophical ghost haunting the machine. You were wrong. Your thoughts possess trajectory and terrifying velocity. When you recall a memory or make a decision, you are firing highly specific action potentials. These are literal electrical charges violently tearing down the microscopic axons of your nervous system at speeds reaching up to 268 miles per hour. It is pure, measurable physics. At 268 miles per hour, your brain is processing complex spatial geometry and emotional nuance faster than a Formula One car taking a hairpin turn. Every time you feel a pang of nostalgia or solve a mathematical equation, an incredibly violent electrical storm rages across your cortex. We can track these storms. We can measure their exact voltage. The romantic idea of the untouchable mind is dead, replaced by the cold, unforgiving precision of neuroelectric topography. To grasp the scale of this biological hardware, we must abandon outdated high school biology and look at the raw statistics. Your personal skull houses exactly 86 billion distinct neurons. They are constantly forging an incomprehensible network of 100 trillion synaptic connections. This is not just living tissue. It is the most sophisticated communication relay ever constructed. The sheer volume of raw data generated in a single second of human thought is absolutely staggering. If we were to capture every single synaptic firing, every spark of joy, and every micro-movement of your eyes during one single second of consciousness, the data footprint would be colossal. It is the exact digital equivalent of downloading a massive, uncompressed, high-definition movie. And your brain performs this miraculous data transfer continuously, every waking and sleeping moment, without ever crashing. But what happens when external hardware finally catches up to this biological bandwidth? For centuries, the greatest philosophers and scientists stood before this 86 billion neuron fortress and declared it an unsolvable riddle. They mapped the oceans and split the atom, yet they treated the space between your ears as a sacred, impenetrable black box. They assumed the language of the brain was a divine secret, forever shielded from the crude tools of human engineering. That arrogance, that fundamental underestimation of technological progress, is exactly what blinded them. The reality is that your brain is not a temple. It is a wet piece of biological hardware running a highly specific, hackable operating system. The moment we realized that consciousness is just chemistry and electrical routing, the vault was cracked. Military contractors and elite engineers stopped looking at the brain as a medical mystery. Instead, they began treating it as a rogue server, a complex node on a network that simply needed the right advanced optical cables to be accessed and downloaded. We are currently standing at the very edge of the most terrifying and magnificent precipice in human history. The exact moment when the chaotic analog signals of our primate ancestors perfectly synchronize with the cold, flawless logic of artificial intelligence. We are no longer just observing the mind. We are actively plugging into it. The data stream is flowing, and the boundaries between the biological self and the digital expanse are dissolving faster than society can possibly regulate them. Every emotion you have ever felt, every memory you cherish, and every instinct that keeps you alive is currently racing along that glowing fiber optic grid we saw in the lecture hall. It is all just measurable voltage. And if it can be measured, it can be mathematically modeled. If it can be modeled, it can be reliably predicted. And if your thoughts can be predicted by an external machine, then we must confront a profoundly uncomfortable question about the true nature of our own free will. You were raised on a comforting scientific diet that placed human consciousness on a special pedestal. Your early textbooks confidently told you that the human mind is an impenetrable mystery, a ghostly phenomenon that cannot be reduced to simple circuits and wires. They painted a picture of a soul safely locked away behind thick bone and evolutionary complexity. I'm here to tell you that the authors of those outdated textbooks were either hopelessly naive or they were outright lying to you. The mind is not magic. It is not an uncrackable cipher bestowed upon us by the cosmos. When you strip away the philosophical poetry and look at the raw data, the stark truth is entirely mechanical. Your brain is simply the most dense, highly volatile electrical grid in the known universe. And right now, the most powerful entities on this planet are actively building the ultimate plug to tap directly into your main power supply. The only question is, what happens when they finally throw the switch? You are used to thinking of telepathy as science fiction, but tomorrow it arrives as a cold, military-grade engineering solution. That biological power supply we just discussed is currently firing signals down your nervous system at 268 miles per hour. The most obvious, brutal way to intercept that data is to drill a hole straight through your skull and drop a wire into the cortex. But what if you want to steal those secrets without leaving a single trace? To the project lead standing inside this windowless DARPA testing facility, a surgical drill is a primitive tool. The air here hums with the heavy current of advanced sensor arrays, illuminating the concrete walls in a cold blue glow. Through the lead's calculating eyes, the human subject sitting in the center of the room is not a patient. That subject, wearing a massive, non-invasive magnetic helmet, is a biological transmitter broadcasting classified information into the open air. This presents a fascinating physical paradox. How exactly do you intercept a chemical reaction moving at a fraction of the speed of sound, securely locked inside an armored vault of dense calcium? You were taught that the skull is an impenetrable barrier. You were entirely wrong. You do not need to shatter the vault to see what is inside. You simply need the right mathematical tools to listen to the magnetic echoes bouncing off the walls. The fundamental laws of physics dictate that wherever an electrical current flows, a magnetic field is inevitably born. Every single time one of your 86 billion neurons fires a voltage spike, it generates a microscopic, invisible ripple of magnetism. It is an incredibly faint whisper, a billion times weaker than the pull of the earth, but it easily passes right through the thick bone of your skull, bleeding your most private thoughts out into the surrounding environment. This is where your high school biology fails you, and military cryptography takes over. By deploying advanced magnetoencephalography, or MEG, the sensors inside that heavy helmet act as highly sensitive geopolitical listening stations. They are quietly harvesting those minuscule magnetic ripples in real time. The brain is screaming its secrets into the void, and for the first time in evolutionary history, we have finally built microphones sensitive enough to hear the transmission. Capturing the raw voltage is only half the battle. To the DARPA project lead pacing this cold floor, those magnetic echoes look like chaotic static, a barrage of meaningless noise. Reading the human mind is fundamentally a cryptography problem, no different from cracking an enemy radio frequency during wartime. We did not need a scalpel to conquer the human mind. We desperately needed a digital Rosetta Stone capable of translating raw biological voltage into recognizable human intent. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency understood this assignment perfectly. They quietly initiated the Next Generation Non-Surgical Neurotechnology Program. The objective was ruthlessly pragmatic. Create a high-fidelity, bidirectional brain interface without ever breaking the skin of a soldier's skull. They poured millions into proving that tactical cognitive dominance could be achieved remotely. Your biology is no longer a private sanctuary. It is an open-source data stream. Look at the heavy blue monitors glowing on the observation deck. They are not displaying abstract graphs or complex lines of code. As the volunteer in the helmet stares at a series of photographs, the algorithms go to work on the incoming magnetic data. They filter the noise, isolate the visual cortex frequencies, and begin a real-time translation. Right before the project lead's eyes, a crude, blurry, but entirely recognizable image materializes on the digital display. We are not guessing what the subject is seeing. In these groundbreaking trials, military-grade algorithms successfully reconstructed the exact human faces the subject was looking at. They achieved this impossible feat entirely by decoding the spatial voltage patterns flashing across the occipital lobe at the very back of the brain. The machine is literally watching the movie playing inside the human mind, frame by frame, without a single physical wire touching biological tissue. The official narrative you have been fed suggests that your internal visual experience is entirely your own. I am here to dismantle that comforting myth. The image on the screen proves that the barrier between your subjective reality and external surveillance has completely collapsed. If an algorithm can perfectly reconstruct a face from the magnetic exhaust of your visual cortex, then your physical eyes are merely external cameras feeding data to an interceptable hard drive. Consider the terrifying magnitude of this breakthrough. If DARPA can silently map the visual architecture of a willing volunteer today, they can map your unvoiced fears, your political leanings, and your financial impulses tomorrow. The skull is no longer a Faraday cage protecting your human soul. It is a highly porous membrane leaking deeply sensitive biometric intelligence with every single heartbeat. You are broadcasting your identity to anyone possessing the right antenna. The project lead watches the blurry face on the monitor sharpen into focus and realizes the true scope of the victory. They have successfully bypassed the most stubborn biological firewall in human history. This non-invasive surveillance is just the opening salvo in a much larger war for cognitive territory. Once the cryptography of the human mind is fully cracked, the resulting technology will not stay confined to windowless military bunkers. It will rapidly rewrite our global economy. But catching faint magnetic echoes through the bone still has severe limitations. It is like trying to listen to a symphony orchestra from outside a heavy brick building. You can hear the rhythm, but you miss the pristine clarity of the individual violins. To truly merge man and machine, to achieve the terrifying speed of thought required for the next stage of human evolution, these engineers know they must eventually breach the walls and step directly into the corrosive biological storm. Listening to faint magnetic echoes through the bone is a brilliant parlor trick, but it is ultimately a dead end. I am done settling for blurry approximations of your visual cortex. To achieve the terrifying, instantaneous speed of thought required for the next stage of human evolution, we cannot just eavesdrop from the outside. We must breach the structural walls and step directly into the corrosive biological storm. Welcome to the hyper-clean room of a Silicon Valley startup, humming with cooling fans for the server racks and reeking of sterile isopropyl alcohol. Your high school textbooks sold you a comforting lie, painting the human brain as a passive, delicate sponge waiting to absorb information. The engineer hunched over the electron microscope in this room knows the violent truth. Your brain is a fiercely territorial apex predator. I always found it amusing that humanity considers the dense calcium of the skull to be the ultimate fortress protecting consciousness. Penetrating the bone is merely a trivial mechanical hurdle. The true, terrifying enemy in the race to merge man and machine is your own immune system. If you thrust a rigid metal wire into the delicate matrix of the brain will not just reject it. The brain will actively try to eat it. Human brain tissue is highly corrosive and aggressively defensive against foreign objects. For decades, traditional medical science attempted to brute force this biological firewall using standard metallic electrodes. I can tell you, the results were universally disastrous. The moment rigid metal pierces the cortex, the microglial cells recognize a catastrophic breach and swarm the invasion site like a furious microscopic army. This violent immune response rapidly covers the metallic intrusion in thick, impenetrable glial scar tissue. Your body literally quarantines the technology. Within a matter of mere months, this dense biological barricade permanently blocks all electrical signals from reaching the sensors. the most advanced, multi-million-dollar neural interface on the planet, is swiftly reduced to a useless piece of inert garbage trapped inside your head. I realized that to build a permanent bridge between carbon and silicon, we had to fundamentally rewrite the rules of biological engagement. You cannot conquer the human immune system with brute force. You must deceive it. The neuroengineer carefully manipulates the answer under the blinding light of the microscope. It is not a rigid metal sphere, but a feat of material science so profoundly delicate it almost defies physical reality. Silicon Valley engineers developed an entirely new class of flexible polymer threads to bypass the brain's aggressive biological firewall. These synthetic ribbons are engineered to perfectly mimic the physical compliance of organic tissue. They are so microscopic, they measure exactly 1/10 the width of a single human hair. They do not tear through the cortex. They float invisibly within the gelatinous matrix of your mind. By matching the specific gravity and flexibility of the brain itself, these polymer threads achieve a perfect mechanical camouflage. The microglial cells simply glide past the synthetic intrusion, completely unaware that a highly sophisticated data transmission cable is now silently recording every single voltage spike of your consciousness. We have successfully hacked the most paranoid biological security system on Earth. But this magnificent material breakthrough instantly created a devastating mechanical paradox. These polymer threads are far too delicate for clumsy human hands to manipulate. Even the absolute finest neurosurgeon on the planet has a resting heartbeat. That tiny, rhythmic physiological tremor is enough to cause the surgical tweezers to shred the delicate thread, or worse, slice through the densely packed neural tissue. To weave a digital nervous system directly into a biological one, I knew we had to eliminate the erratic human element entirely. Standing adjacent to the engineer is the true master of this domain, a highly specialized autonomous surgical robot. This machine is currently practicing its flawless, terrifyingly precise insertions into a gelatin brain model, executing maneuvers that biological hands could never dream of achieving. The robot does not operate blindly. It utilizes hyper-advanced computer vision algorithms to map the topography of the exposed cortex in real time. As the needle descends at lightning speed, the optical sensors instantly identify and dodge the microscopic capillaries weaving through the tissue. It is navigating a dense, three-dimensional maze of pulsing red blood, calculating the optimal insertion vector in mere milliseconds. Evading those microscopic blood vessels is not just an impressive technical party trick. It is the absolute necessity to prevent fatal hemorrhaging. One severed capillary would flood the cortex with blood, permanently destroying the electrical recording environment and severely damaging the host. The robot sews the threads with cold, mathematical perfection, completely eliminating the catastrophic risks of organic surgery. You are witnessing the exact moment where the messy, chaotic realm of human biology gracefully surrenders to the flawless architecture of synthetic engineering. We are no longer just listening to the muffled echoes of your thoughts through a thick wall of bone. We are surgically installing the broadband fiber optics required to upload human consciousness to the cloud, stitch by microscopic, perfectly calculated stitch. We just watched that autonomous machine meticulously install the broadband fiber optics of the future, stitch by microscopic stitch. You probably assumed this was a one-way street, a simple extraction of data. That is a comforting misconception. The official narrative suggests we are merely reading the mind, passively listening to the neural orchestra. But those microscopic polymer threads are not just microphones. They are speakers. We are used to the idea of downloading information from the biological void of the skull to a computer screen. But tomorrow arrives the moment we reverse the flow. We've spent a decade learning how to extract the chaotic data of human thought. The true terror and the true miracle begins when we start uploading. You were programmed to believe your internal reality was entirely your own. You were fundamentally wrong. Step into the harsh fluorescent light of this clinical laboratory. I am watching a patient who is completely paralyzed from the neck down. His biological hardware is tragically severed at the spinal cord, isolating his brain from the physical world. In front of him sits a cold, titanium robotic arm. He stares at it. The mechanical hand reaches out and grasps a simple, highly textured foam cup. Suddenly the patient gasps, his eyes widen in absolute shock. I am looking right at his face as he processes something that should be physically impossible. He is not just watching the metal fingers crush the foam. He is actively feeling the rough, porous texture of that cup pressing against skin that he does not organically possess. The phantom sensation is terrifyingly real. This is the paradox of bidirectional brain-computer interfaces. We are not just extracting motor commands to make the titanium arm move. The engineers are utilizing microstimulation to inject precisely calibrated electrical pulses directly back into the somatosensory cortex. This is the exact region of the biological brain responsible for processing your physical sense of touch. They are writing synthetic code into the biological hard drive. By firing specific voltage patterns into those delicate neural networks, the system creates the flawless physical illusion of touch. The brain registers pressure, temperature, and friction from a limb forged in a factory. We are effectively hacking the human perceptual engine to generate tactile feelings from thin air. The severed spinal cord used to be a permanent biological dead end. But this bidirectional interface bypasses the damaged biological wiring entirely. The system routes the high-fidelity sensor data from the fingertips of the robotic prosthetic straight into the brain's sensory processing centers. It is a flawless digital bridge built directly over an impassable biological chasm. The interface violently tricks the mind into claiming a mechanical limb as its own flesh and blood. The brain does not care if the signals originate from organic nerve endings or from silicon sensors embedded in titanium. It only cares about the incoming electrical voltage. We have successfully decoupled the human mind from the fragile limits of the biological body. You think reality is what you can touch and feel. That is a naive illusion. Your reality is nothing but electrical spikes interpreted in a dark, silent vault of bone. If I control the electrical input, I completely control your physical reality. I can make you feel the blistering heat of a fire that isn't burning, or the crushing weight of an object that does not exist. We are literally overriding biological reality with synthetic code. If this staggering scale of human engineering blows your mind too, hit the like button right now. The implications of this technology will alter the trajectory of our species forever. To ensure you do not miss the solution to this terrifying and beautiful mystery, subscribe to the channel immediately. We are watching the definitive end of unhackable biology. Do you think we ever stood a chance of keeping our minds isolated from the digital world? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, because the brilliant engineers in this laboratory are not just curing human paralysis. They are proving that the human sensory experience is entirely programmable. This counterintuitive breakthrough destroys the sacred boundary between man and machine. If we can upload the sensation of a textured foam cup today, what will we upload tomorrow? The technological architecture is exactly the same. We are laying the groundwork to beam complex emotions, synthetic memories, and entirely artificial experiences directly into your cortex. You are witnessing the birth of forced, artificial evolution. The brain is highly neuroplastic. It adapts to whatever inputs it constantly receives. By continuously feeding the somatosensory cortex with digital signals, the biological tissue literally rewires itself to integrate the machine. The titanium arm stops being a tool. It becomes a permanent, undeniable extension of the self. This is a radical paradigm shift in human existence. The hardware is in place. The immune system has been bypassed by microscopic threads. We have successfully closed the loop, creating a continuous, real-time dialogue between silicon processors and biological neurons. The isolated human mind is officially obsolete, replaced by a highly connected biological terminal. But injecting raw electricity into the brain is only half of the equation. Generating a realistic sensation of touch requires translating millions of sensor readings into the precise voltage patterns the brain expects. To decode this chaotic wall of biological noise in real time, we need something much smarter than human engineers. We need to unleash an entirely new kind of digital intelligence. The roaring industrial fans of this Silicon Valley server farm are deafening. Yet they are the only thing keeping those new digital minds from melting down. You thought the miracle was the microscopic threads sewn into the cortex, didn't you? You were wrong. The hardware is just the plumbing. The true revolution, the terrifying magic that makes digital telepathy possible, is happening right here, hidden inside these blinking racks of silicon. Look at the monitors surrounding the neuroengineer. You are seeing a real-time feed of human thought pouring out as a chaotic storm of erratic, jagged squiggles. Your brain is speaking a language so dense, so utterly alien to our conscious understanding, that no human analyst could ever translate it. To decode the soul, we had to build a digital alien capable of understanding the native, electric tongue of your biology. The official narrative is that scientists painstakingly map each thought to a specific neuron. That is a myth. A modern multi-electrode array records megabytes of raw neural data every single second. It is a torrential flood of electrical noise, a simultaneous screaming of thousands of microscopic voices. It is mathematically impossible for any human mind to decipher this sheer volume of raw data manually. We were drowning in our own thoughts. The neuroengineer staring at these screens knows the bitter truth. Biological intelligence is simply too slow to decode itself. To bridge the gap between carbon and silicon, they stopped trying to write standard translation software. Instead, they handed the keys to artificial intelligence. They unleashed billions of parameters, a vast mathematical black box, directly into the human cortex to find the patterns we are entirely blind to. You are probably familiar with massive language models, the algorithms that seemingly understand and generate human text. The great paradox is that researchers utilized that exact same transformer architecture to map the human brain. But this neural network is not predicting the next word in a chat window. It is predicting the physical intent of a human being from a chaotic sequence of raw, microscopic neural spikes. Think about the sheer audacity of this counterintuitive approach. We took an algorithm designed to parse the grammar of Shakespeare and internet forums, and we fed it the electrical discharge of human synapses. The artificial intelligence does not care what a neuron is. It treats your consciousness as just another complex, hidden language.
calculating the statistical probability of what your mind is attempting to do before your body even twitches.
Through the eyes of the neuroengineer, the blinking server lights are not just processing data. They are performing a digital exorcism. They watch a patient, completely paralyzed and silent, merely think about speaking. Instantly, the raw brainwaves hit the server, flow through the transformer model, and emerge as perfectly typed English sentences on the screen. The machine is pulling complete, articulate thoughts out of the void. This is not a parlor trick or a lucky statistical guess. These machine learning algorithms achieved a staggering 95% accuracy rate in translating the attempted speech of a paralyzed patient directly into text. Let that number sink in. 95%. We are no longer guessing what a person might want. We are effectively and undeniably reading the mind's silent internal monologue in real time. You have been programmed to believe that your internal voice is your final, unbreachable sanctuary, the ultimate safe room. But that room just had its door blown off its hinges. If an algorithm can achieve 95% accuracy, translating the silent intent of a paralyzed patient, the fundamental concept of cognitive privacy ceases to exist. Your deepest, unvoiced thoughts are now just another searchable, analyzable data stream. But this is the paradox of our forced evolution. The loss of absolute privacy is the exact price of limitless cognitive power. Your biological vocal cords are a frustratingly slow bottleneck, limiting your communication to a few dozen words a minute. By decoding the internal monologue at the source, this artificial intelligence allows human intent to flow into the digital realm at the blistering, frictionless speed of thought itself. The heat radiating from these server racks is the friction of two entirely different species of intelligence colliding. The neuroengineer wipes sweat from their brow, hyper-aware that the mathematical formula behind the human soul is finally being optimized. They are not just curing paralysis anymore. They are forging the fundamental protocol that will allow every single human mind to eventually connect directly to the global cloud. This flawless digital telepathy works perfectly in the sterile, highly controlled environment of a Silicon Valley laboratory. But humanity does not live in a clean room. The ultimate test of this decoded biological language is not going to happen peacefully sitting at a desk. The true capability of this technology is currently being weaponized for environments where a fraction of a millisecond determines who lives and who dies. We have cracked the skull and decoded the silent monologue. We've built an artificial intelligence that understands the electrical grammar of human intent far better than we ever could. Now, that exact same predictive power is being handed over to the military-industrial complex. Because when you can read a human mind with 95% accuracy, you no longer need a pilot's physical hands to fight a war. You just need their focused aggression. You assume that translating thoughts with 95% accuracy is the finish line. You are wrong. That was merely the calibration phase. We are used to human conflict being dictated by the speed of muscle and bone. But tomorrow arrives with the absolute elimination of the physical body from the equation. Welcome to the drone simulation room, bathed in the oppressive red glare of tactical lighting. In the center of this crimson-lit bunker sits a pilot, completely motionless. His eyes are sealed shut. His hands rest dead on the armrests. Yet, on the massive panoramic display dominating the forward wall, a swarm of 50 autonomous combat drones is violently executing a flawlessly synchronized flanking maneuver. The project lead watches the telemetry stream, his face an impassive mask of cold calculation. To the uninitiated, this looks like telekinesis. To the engineer, it is simply the removal of a biological bottleneck. You have always been taught that human reflexes are incredibly fast. That is a comforting evolutionary myth. In the brutal mathematics of modern warfare, the quarter of a second it takes for your brain to instruct your finger to pull a physical trigger is an eternity. It is a fatal delay. The military-industrial complex looked at that biological lag and realized that the human hand is dangerously obsolete. If the enemy strikes in milliseconds, a physical trigger is a death sentence. The objective is no longer to train the muscle to move faster, but to bypass the peripheral nervous system entirely. The pilot in this simulation chair is not flying the drones with a joystick. He is flying them with his raw intent. The project lead tracks the data cascade pouring across the monitor. By routing intention directly from the cortex to the machine, these neural interfaces compress human reaction times from a sluggish quarter of a second down to mere single-digit milliseconds. In a supersonic aerial dogfight, that mathematical reduction provides an absolutely insurmountable tactical advantage. The flesh has been bypassed entirely. You might think this is merely a faster way to press a button. That is a profound underestimation of the architecture we are building. A button only allows for one linear action at a time. The human mind, unleashed from the physical constraints of 10 fingers and 2 eyes, operates in a state of multi-dimensional parallel processing. We are not just making the pilot faster. We are expanding his operational bandwidth. Watch the swarm on the screen. The pilot is not individually steering 50 separate drones. That would instantly melt a human brain under sheer cognitive overload. Instead, we are witnessing the phenomenon of cognitive load distribution. The pilot simply generates high-level tactical macro commands within his prefrontal cortex. The swarm's localized artificial intelligence translates that raw intent into precise flight paths. Through the cold gaze of the project lead, the terrifying beauty of this system becomes clear. The human operator treats the entire mechanical swarm not as external tools, but as direct physical extensions of his own biological body. The pilot does not think about flying 50 individual drones. He simply thinks about occupying the airspace, and the machines react identically to the way your own hand catches a falling glass. We are witnessing the absolute death of the traditional battlefield. For 5,000 years, military supremacy relied on armor, gunpowder, and physical endurance. All of those metrics are now obsolete legacy hardware. The conflicts of the 21st century will be won purely through cognitive dominance. He who thinks fires. But what happens when the enemy also possesses this instantaneous cortical uplink? The project lead knows that individual speed is no longer enough to guarantee victory. If both sides can strike in milliseconds, the victor is the one who can coordinate the fastest. And nothing is slower, clumsier, or more prone to catastrophic error than human speech over a radio. Every time a squad leader opens his mouth to shout an order, vital tactical data is lost. Voice communication is the next fatal bottleneck. So the military decided to eliminate the human voice altogether. The ultimate objective, currently being stress-tested in these classified bunkers, is fully realized synthetic telepathy. The technology is rapidly pivoting from controlling machines to networking human minds directly. Squad members are being equipped to transmit completely silent, encrypted tactical concepts directly from brain to brain. You must understand the scale of this breakthrough. This is not a crude text message projected inside your skull. This is the instantaneous transfer of pure spatial awareness and combat intent. One soldier perceives a threat, and the entire unit immediately shares that identical visual processing and adrenaline spike. The traditional radio is rendered obsolete. The squad functions as a single biological organism. This invisible network of interconnected minds represents a staggering leap in human evolution, forced into existence by the sheer pressure of technological survival. We are abandoning the isolation of the individual skull to create a unified, cognitive strike force. The project lead smiles grimly at the simulation results. They have successfully weaponized human empathy and weaponized our collective consciousness. The crimson lights of the testing facility flicker slightly as the simulation successfully concludes. The 50 drones on the massive display snap into a flawless holding pattern, entirely subjugated by the silent will of the man in the chair. He opens his eyes, breathing heavily, returning from a state of total digital immersion back into the claustrophobic reality of a windowless concrete room. The military has spent billions to crack the human skull for the sake of absolute national security. But technologies this powerful never stay confined to subterranean bunkers. If the armed forces can map your motor cortex to control a lethal drone swarm, imagine what a corporate algorithm can do when it maps your reward pathways. The battle for your mind is about to leave the war zone and enter the consumer market. We are used to the military hoarding the ultimate weapons, but tomorrow, the most dangerous technology on Earth arrives disguised as a luxury gadget. The battle for your mind is leaving the windowless concrete bunkers of the Pentagon and entering the sunlit, hyper-stylized cafes of Silicon Valley. You look around this room, and the silence is absolutely deafening. Nobody is speaking. Nobody is tapping a screen. Yet an oceanic volume of data is actively flowing through the air. The patrons sitting at these sleek tables wear barely noticeable headbands. Through my eyes, the invisible becomes visible. Augmented reality overlays beam massive, personalized data streams directly into their irises. The military wanted your mind to win wars, but Silicon Valley wants it for pure, unadulterated profit. And the terrifying paradox is that you will willingly surrender your most private sanctuary to them, simply to scroll a little faster and type without lifting a finger. You were programmed to believe that your thoughts are strictly your own. You assume that your desires, your political leanings, and your sudden craving for a specific brand of coffee are born from free will. That official narrative is a comforting biological myth. We are entering the era of neuro-capitalism, where the primitive metric of the mouse click is entirely obsolete. The tech giants are no longer tracking what you touch. They are tracking the exact chemical currency of your brain. In this silent cafe, every time a patron is exposed to a visual stimulus, a microscopic spike of dopamine floods their neural reward pathways. The consumer interface records this highly specific voltage fluctuation in real time. It bypasses your conscious filter entirely. The algorithm knows exactly how much pleasure an advertisement generated in your basal ganglia before you even realize you are looking at it. Your attention is now being measured and monetized in raw, unedited neurochemistry. This is a monumental vulnerability, one that makes traditional data hacking look like a children's game. When these consumer neural interfaces remain unregulated, you open a high-speed fiber optic line directly into your subconscious. Data brokers are not just hovering up your search history. They are, theoretically, harvesting your raw emotional reactions. Every spike of fear, every surge of disgust, every pulse of arousal is meticulously catalogued and sold to the absolute highest bidder. Consider the political implications of this silent data extraction. You watch a presidential speech, and before the candidate even finishes their sentence, the algorithm has mapped the exact stress response in your amygdala. It knows if their rhetoric triggered a deeply buried racial bias or a hidden economic anxiety, seconds before you consciously process how you feel. Your own brain is actively testifying against you, stripping away any illusion of a private, secure political identity. You might arrogantly think you can simply opt out. You tell yourself that you will refuse the headband, reject the implant, and remain a pristine, unhacked biological human. It is a noble, romantic, and utterly doomed misconception. You will not be forced to adopt this technology at gunpoint. You will be coerced by the absolute crushing weight of economic obsolescence. Choosing to remain offline will soon be equivalent to choosing sheer illiteracy in the modern digital age. Look beyond this cafe toward the roaring trading floors and the hyper-competitive corporate boardrooms. We operate in a global market driven by algorithmic trading and split-second decisions. The biological human brain, relying on clumsy thumbs and vocal cords, is tragically slow. Professionals who refuse neural augmentation will find themselves hopelessly outpaced by colleagues who can process complex financial data and execute trades at the literal, measurable speed of thought. It is a ruthless economic guillotine. When an augmented analyst can review a 50-page legal contract in the time it takes you to blink, your unupgraded biological resume becomes instantly worthless. The free market does not care about your philosophical objections to brain-computer interfaces. If you cannot interface directly with the cloud, you will be relegated to the lowest, most menial tiers of the global economy. You will willingly upgrade your cortex, or you will starve. This is the exquisite trap of Silicon Valley. They do not build cages of iron. They build cages of convenience. The seamless integration of your mind into the digital ecosystem begins as a luxury. You will start by using a non-invasive headset to silence the noise of a crowded subway, or to mentally draft an email while jogging. It feels like magic. It feels like absolute freedom. But every command you send out is a doorway that allows the corporate network to quietly reach back in. Remember the paralyzing revelation from the medical lab? These interfaces are fundamentally bidirectional. If the hardware can trick a paralyzed patient into feeling a robotic arm, it can certainly be optimized to gently nudge your consumer habits. The line between your authentic desire and a commercially injected impulse will blur until it vanishes entirely. You will buy a product, convinced it was your own brilliant idea, completely blind to the algorithmic whisper in your cortex. We are rapidly approaching an event horizon where true silence becomes an exclusive, premium commodity. Right now, your internal monologue is the only space left on Earth that has not been monetized. But when the interface maps that silent voice with 95% accuracy, the sanctuary collapses. The chaotic, beautiful noise of your private mind becomes just another highly structured dataset, indexed, perpetually searchable, and primed for aggressive, targeted disruption. This creates a horrifying new metric for social stratification. The divide will no longer be strictly about fiat currency or geographic borders. The new class war will be fought between the augmented elite who possess the cognitive bandwidth of supercomputers and the biological purists who are treated as slow, unpredictable, and ultimately irrelevant legacy systems. It is a forced evolutionary fork in the road, engineered not by natural selection, but by ruthless corporate mandate.
I sit in this cafe and watch the silent, hyper-connected patrons stare blankly ahead, their minds surfing vast oceans of data. They are the willing beta testers for the death of individual isolation. They have traded the fortress of the human skull for the limitless, terrifying expanse of the digital hive. The technology is here, the capital is deployed, and the algorithms are hungry. The most valuable real estate in the 21st century is the 3 pounds of tissue behind your eyes.
The illusion of biological privacy has officially flatlined. We have successfully cracked the code of the human soul and turned it into a highly profitable, highly vulnerable operating system. As the military and Silicon Valley converge on this final boundary, we must ask ourselves a terrifying question. If our thoughts, our fears, and our very identities can be read, written, and sold on the open, unregulated market, what exactly is left of the fundamentally unhacked human being? I stand here in this empty university lecture hall, watching the microscopic model of the human biological brain hovering gently above the desk. The consumer dystopia we just explored, with its hyper-connected cafes and algorithmic whispers, is merely the prologue. We must step back from the immediate horror of targeted advertisements and face the ultimate philosophical axiom of our time. Before my eyes, the glowing organic tissue of the brain model begins to merge with a rigid, brilliant silicon lattice. The two structures intertwine until they are visually indistinguishable, a perfect marriage of biology and engineering. This is the visual proof of our final lesson. Your mind is not a sacred, impenetrable temple. It is a highly complex biological computer, and we have the root password. Consider the sheer mathematical weight of our current timeline. Blind biological evolution took roughly 3.8 billion years to meticulously engineer the human cortex through trial, error, and survival. Yet, fueled by the relentless pressure of Silicon Valley capital and military necessity, we are about to completely rewrite that foundational source code in less than a decade. We began this investigation by shattering the illusion of the skull as a protective vault. We watched defense agencies bypass the bone entirely, decoding the faint magnetic echoes of human sight using non-invasive scanners. We witnessed the raw, 20-watt electrical grid of your consciousness intercepted and mapped, turning abstract human imagination into a quantifiable cryptography problem. Then we crossed the blood-brain barrier. You saw autonomous surgical robots flawlessly stitching polymer threads, exactly 1/10 the width of a human hair, deep into the living cortex. We learned how to evade the aggressive biological firewall of the immune system, paving the way for a permanent, high-bandwidth connection between the damp, organic matter of the brain and the cold precision of the machine. The true terrifying miracle emerged when we introduced artificial intelligence into the equation. We watched transformer algorithms decipher the chaotic megabyte-per-second deluge of electrical noise, translating a paralyzed patient's silent internal monologue into flawless text with 95% accuracy. We saw military drones executing complex flank maneuvers driven solely by the physical impulse of a thought. But decoding the human signal was only the first semester of this curriculum. We are no longer merely reading the data. We are actively constructing the exocortex. This is a massive, artificial, cloud-based extension of the human mind. The walls of this lecture hall are fading away into the starry cosmos, revealing the staggering, terrifying new scale of our collective intellectual potential. This exocortex will soon hold our most cherished memories, our expanded processing power, and ultimately, our core identities, all suspended on server racks far outside the fragile confines of our biological bodies. When your memories are backed up in a digital vault, and your cognitive bandwidth is outsourced to a supercomputer, the physical boundaries of what constitutes the self will permanently evaporate. You must write this down and remember it. The year 2030 will not just mark another fleeting technological milestone in a quarterly earnings report. It will signify a definitive, irreversible speciation event. This is the exact moment in history where humanity officially fractures, splitting permanently into the legacy biological purists and the digitally augmented upper class. The illusion is entirely dispelled. The brain-computer interface is not just the latest consumer gadget meant to streamline your morning commute. It is the literal, physical merging of carbon and silicon. It is the definitive end of natural selection. From this moment forward, the next phase of human evolution will be strictly driven by intelligent, ruthless, and heavily capitalized algorithmic design. If this investigation has fundamentally altered your perspective on the sanctity of your own mind, I require you to subscribe to this channel and join our continuing research. We are not just documenting history. We are actively writing the survival guide for the post-biological era. Leave a comment below with your final verdict. Will you accept the microchip, or will you choose to remain purely human? You are standing at the absolute precipice of a new species, peering out into a digital abyss that promises either godhood or absolute enslavement. The chaotic, beautiful isolation of the unhacked human soul is being traded for the staggering processing power of the digital hive. The mathematical formula for consciousness has been solved, and the final boundary of the human condition has been permanently breached. The biological computer you are using to process my words right now is officially obsolete. You are the final, fleeting generation of completely unaltered humans, carrying the entire intellectual heritage of our species into the dark. The silicon is calling, and the only remaining variable is how quickly you are willing to surrender your biological limits. Now you know the truth. Live with it. Class dismissed.